Hey guys, how you going? My name is Dom, and in today's video we're going to be creating a data table for the web with refresh capabilities. Okay, so what I mean by refresh capability is essentially our table can be refreshed asynchronously. Okay, so for example, right here, this is actually going to be the final product. Now, if I refresh on the bottom right here, we can see the data refreshes, and this is actually making a fetch request to the server side to get the updated data. In this example, these people might just be a list of different rankings for a game or something like that. And we've also got a nice little timestamp which shows the last updated date time of the data. Okay, so like I said, if I go inside the network tab here, we can see each request brings back, of course, fresh data, and that simply just gets inserted into the table right here. So we've also got a nice animation on the actual refresh button. So if I go inside here and make the network, let's just say slow 3G, and then refresh, we can see it now slows down. Okay, so we get a nice little animation for the actual button. Okay, so this uses Express.js for the server side. Okay, so let's go inside this tab right here and begin from scratch to, of course, create what you just saw. Okay, so let's go inside the text editor, and we're going to be firstly creating a new node.js application. Okay, so in the command line we can just say npm init-y to accept all the defaults. Then we can just install a few dependencies. So we're going to be installing, of course, Express.js, so we can say npm i express. We're going to be using chance as well to generate some random data, so we can install chance as well as shuffle array just to randomize our data. Okay, we can install all of those, and once that's done, we can move on to installing nodemon for our development command. Okay, so let's clear this, and we can say npm i -- save dev, then include nodemon right here. Okay. So now our package JSON looks something like this, and we can actually go ahead and just include two scripts here. So we can just, once it's done, we can just do this, and we can say start, and start can simply just be node at index.js, and the dev environment, or sorry, the dev command or dev scripts can be dev. Then we can just say nodemon index.js. Okay, cool. So now we can go ahead and actually create our index.js file. So make a new file here called index.js, and inside here we can, of course, begin writing the server. Okay, so first let's include express. So we can say const express equal to require express. We can also include the chance.js library. Okay, so chance equal to require chance, then .chance just like that. And we can also include here shuffle array, and we can just call this shuffle array like this, equal to, of course, require then shuffle-array. Okay, so let's begin writing our single routes for the server side. So we can say const app equal to just express. Then we can just go down here and we can say app.get. We're going to make a route just called data. Okay, and inside here we're just going to be returning some sample data. So first I just want to actually make sure everything's working. So let's just simply, for now, send back a single line. We can just say res.send and pass through here hey Dom. Okay, and then down here we can just run the server app.listen on port 3001. We can just say yep, console.log app is running. Okay, cool. So now let's test it out. We can use npm run dev, and we should get the app running right there. Okay, so now let's go in the browser and make a request to our endpoint of /data. Okay, and we get hey Dom right there, so we can proceed with working on the actual application itself. Okay, so let's go back inside here, and now we can define just some sample data. Okay, so let's make a new constant up here called data, and essentially this data is going to remain the same for essentially, once we start the server, the data right there is going to stay the same, but on each request we're simply just going to randomize the actual rows. Okay, so with that being said, for the data, let's actually structure it in a way where we have essentially the headers and the actual rows of information separated. Okay, so we can say headers right here equal to an array of headers. So for example, we can say name, then age, then profession, then we can say country. Okay, so those are our 4 headers for the table. Okay, now I forgot to mention earlier, this table is actually going to be able to be generated sort of dynamically. So essentially, you don't need to define these headers right here in the front end. The headers and the data is going to be defined on the server side. So basically, the table is going to work in most scenarios. You can simply go inside your server side, change a few columns around, and it should work perfectly fine. So those are our 4 headers. Now for the rows themselves, we can just say rows, and for this we're going to be creating a new array of 10 elements. Okay, then we can simply just fill the array with undefined, just so we actually have 10 elements to loop through. Okay, then we can say .map. Okay, inside .map we can run this function, and essentially we are then let's just return an array right here, and this array is going to represent each row. Okay, so essentially for the name, for example, okay, the name data is going to be, of course, generated 10 times, 1 for each row right here, and essentially it's going to be in position 0, or the first position in the array, or index 0. Okay, with that being said, inside here now we can say chance.name, and chance is going to generate a random name for us. Okay, so index 0 contains the name, then we have age, so I can say chance.age, then I can say chance.profession. Okay, then I can lastly, or I can finally say chance.country and pass through here an option to basically just say full equal to true. This way we actually get a full country name as opposed to just the actual abbreviation. So right here we have the data. Like I said, we have the headers property and then 10 rows full of random data. Okay, so now we can actually return this right here from the data endpoint. So I can say res.json and pass through here our data, just like that. Let's now save this and then refresh the browser, and we can see right here we get our data represented in a JSON format. And like I said earlier, we have of course the headers here, and then essentially our data, index 0 name, index 1 age, and so on. Okay, cool. So now we need to actually structure it that way we actually have a last updated property on the data to of course display to the front end, but more importantly we need to also shuffle these rows each time this endpoint is requested. So to do that, let's go back inside here, and we can say, instead of this, we can say rest.json, this time passing through an object. We're going to say here headers is equal to data.headers, so we're going to leave the headers untouched. For the rows property, we can call the shuffle array function and pass through here data.rows to of course shuffle our array. And then lastly here we can then say last updated, and we're going to be setting this to just simply be the current date time. So we can say new date, then .toISO string, and this will give us an ISO 8601 string representation of the current time. Okay, so let's save this and then refresh, and now we get something like this. We get the data. We've also got right down here the last updated timestamp, and of course the timestamp right there. Let's try again to refresh, and we can see we get the data randomized each time. Okay, so perfect. So now that is basically the data endpoint done, and of course our table is going to constantly, or when you actually press refresh on the table, it is of course going to make a request for this data. Okay, so now we need to create a static middleware. That way we can actually serve some HTML, CSS, and JS for the front end. So let's go back inside here, and we can say up here, we can say essentially just app.use, then pass through here express.static, then we can say just public. So now everything inside the public directory inside here, so we can make a new directory here called public. Inside here is going to be stored, sorry, it's going to be served statically, which means if I make a new index.html file inside here and give it just a base template, okay, and we can just say hi, let's save this and then refresh just on the root path there, we now get hi right there. So of course our HTML file is getting served statically. Okay, so now let's of course do the front end, or the CSS and JS, to of course create this right here. So let's go inside the index.html. The very first thing to do is to include the Google Material Icons library. Okay, so I'll just copy and paste this link right here, and I'll leave a link to this in the description below for you to of course copy and paste inside here. Then I can just say for the title, let's just do data table with refresh. We can also include here a CSS file, so I can say link for CSS at source and then app.css, just like that. Okay, let's do the exact same thing for a JS file. So down here we can say script for JS, source, and then app.js. Let's now just format the document. Okay, maybe not. I just did a fresh install of Windows, so everything's a bit loose at the moment. But anyway, let's go inside here, make a new source directory, just to include both the app.css and the app.js files. So we can say app.css right here, then of course app.js just up here. Okay, cool. So I might just indent this to make it look a lot better. Anyway, moving on. The way it's going to work is basically we're going to be defining a data table in the HTML, and then we can define the root of the actual data inside the actual tag itself. So I'll show you an example. So basically, if I say div right here, so a div with a class of table-refresh as our class name, then I can say right here data-data URL is equal to right here /data. So with this being said, or with this code right here, this is all we want to do in the HTML in order to make this work. So our JavaScript is going to handle cases where we have a table with this data URL and this class right here, and it's going to construct the table, include the button, all those things to make it work smoothly. So with that being said, let's start with the CSS and then move on to the JavaScript. Okay, so I think it's going to be a lot easier to see things with the CSS done. So let's go inside here, and we can simply create basically two elements. The first one's going to be the actual table itself, and the second one is going to be the actual options menu on the bottom with the refresh button. So let's make a new table right here with a class of table-refresh __ table. Okay, inside here we can say thead, then make a new tr. Inside here we can define a few headers now. So I can say, for example, name and then age, for example. Okay, then I'll just minimize this. Okay, where is it? Close. Then I can make a new t-body. Inside here we can say tr, and we can say dom. Let's make dom 45 years old. Okay, cool. Let's save this and refresh, and of course we get something like this. Okay, so now let's just apply some CSS to this table to of course make it look a bit better. So inside the app.css, we can begin by defining or targeting the table refresh class, and I can say minimum width of 400 px and a maximum width of, let's just do 1000 px. Okay, I can say font size and make this 14px, and a font family of quicksand might look not too bad for the Decode YouTube channel. Okay, let's save this and refresh, and now we get something like this. Okay, so we can now target the actual table itself. So let's target table refresh underscore underscore table, and we can firstly say border collapse. We can make this collapse and a maximum width right here. Okay, we can say box shadow. We can say 0, 0, and then 5px RGBA 0, 0, 0, and then 0.2 to make it look a tiny bit better. We can also say border bottom at 2px solid, and then let's just do 009578 for the decode green color. Let's save this and refresh, and now we get something like this. Okay, let's now target the actual table header itself. So I can say table refresh t head and then tr. So of course targeting the actual table head row, and I can say background. Let's make this decode green again and make the text color just a white. Okay, let's save this, refresh, and we get this right here. And now we can obviously just target the actual table head columns and of course the table body columns. So let's just target the table refresh table, th, and then down here we can say td, and we can make the text align of these to be left, and a padding of 9px and then 18px, and we may as well also make the font weight equal to normal, just to eliminate the default bolding of the table head columns. Let's save this and refresh, and now we get something like this. Okay, so of course looking a lot closer to what we saw previously right here. Now let's figure out why the font weight isn't actually changing. So let's go inside here, font weight normal, looks okay to me. Now let's just get rid of this and we get the same thing. So honestly not too sure why it's actually becoming bolder. I might just try here. You know what? Let's go back. So TD looks okay to me. Let's just make this a sans serif and see what happens. Let's try again. Okay, so potentially the font installed on my system is not working correctly. Not too sure what's going on there, but there we go. We have the normal font weight set for the table head and the table rows. So let's go back inside here now and copy another tr, and we can also just say essentially for every second table row, let's make it a light shade of grey for the background. So we can say table refresh table t body, and then tr nth of type, and pass through here even. So now we can just say background, then we can say a very light grey. Let's save this and refresh, and now we get obviously you know what, let's make it odd. Let's go back and make this odd. Then we can duplicate this one more time, save this and refresh, and as we can see, nothing changed for the CSS side. Potentially that's due to some caching. No, it's not. Oh, you know what? Let's make it even. My mistake. Let's make it even. Oh, nth last of type. Hold on. Sorry, nth. Nth of type odd. No, nth of type even. Okay, cool. Let's try again. Let's refresh, and now every second row, starting from the second one, is grey. Perfect. Okay, so that right there is the table designed. Obviously, we just used some random data just for demonstration purposes. So of course, we're going to be replacing this with actual JavaScript. So let's actually move on to doing the actual options on the bottom. Okay, so let's minimize this, and we can just, I believe, make a new div. Okay, so yep, we can make a new div right here with a class of table refresh underscore underscore options. And this right here is going to have a few things. It's going to firstly have the actual span which contains the label. So we can say, for example, span.table refresh underscore underscore label. We can just say last update, then we can say never. Okay, then we can also say right here a button with a type of button, and this is going to have a class of table refresh underscore underscore button. Okay, inside here we can just include I with a class of material dash icons. Okay, with a name of refresh. Okay, so if I save this and refresh, we can see we get right here, of course, our span, but also the icon has rendered. So of course, if I go to the material icons reference, I've chosen the refresh icon just down here. And by typing out refresh, of course, we can see that is going to render that icon right there. So everything's working perfectly fine in that sense. So now let's go inside the CSS and of course style that to make it look a tiny bit better. So we can say table refresh underscore underscore options. For the options container, we can just say display and make this flex and align items of center. Okay, we can also say justify content, make this flex end so it actually floats to the right side, and we can also say padding at 10px and then for top and bottom and 0 for left and right. Now also we can just copy this and we can say the options, then we can select the direct child which is not the last child. So basically, in this case, we're going to be targeting the actual span. In the case where maybe you have multiple different options on the bottom right, you know, this will come in handy. But ultimately, in this case, we're just targeting the span because, of course, it is not the last child. And in this case, we're going to say margin right, make this 12px to, of course, add some space between each individual component or option in that list. Let's save this and refresh, and now we get something like this. Of course, everything is in the bottom right corner. Let's go back inside here now, and we can target the actual button itself. So I can say table refresh underscore underscore button, and we can say firstly background, set this to be a light gray. We can say color, let's make this a darker gray. We can say border, none, outline of none, a display of flex, and align items of center, and a justify content of center. Okay, so all of this stuff right here, of course, the top three are going to be, the top four are going to be for stylistic purposes, just to flatten out the button, and the bottom three here are just to ensure that the actual icon itself inside the span is perfectly centered horizontally and vertically. We can also say here padding 5px and a border radius of, let's just do 50% to make it a perfect circle, and lastly a cursor of pointer. Let's also target the actual icon itself, so we can say table refresh button targeting the icon. Let's override the default font size to be 1.2 EM. Okay, let's save this and refresh, and now we get something like this. Okay, so now we can work on having a class in the CSS to just ensure that the icon actually rotates when we want to refresh. So we're going to be using a modifier class to achieve this. So let's make a new rule set here for table refresh button. Then we can say dash dash refreshing. And for this one, we can simply say animation at 0.5 seconds. Rotate as the animation name. Then we can say infinite and then linear. So basically the animation is going to take 0.5 seconds to run. It's going to run the yet to be created rotate animation. It's going to run infinitely, and it's going to run in a linear pattern, if that's the right word for it. So let's go ahead now and actually define the animation. So I can say keyframes, rotate, of course using the same name as up here. And we can just basically say 2, then for 2 we can say transform, and then rotate 1 turn, just like that. So basically it's going to go from the default rotate of 0 to a rotate of 1 turn, which basically just rotates it a whole turn. So now let's test this out. Let's go back inside the browser. We're going to then refresh. Okay, Then inside here, we can just add the actual class to the button. So I can say dash dash refreshing, press enter, and now we get the nice animation as we refresh the actual button. And of course, this class here of refreshing is going to be added using the actual JavaScript. Okay, so let's move on now to the final part of the CSS, that being the actual label itself. So let's go inside here, add some basic styles for the label. I can say table refresh underscore underscore label, and I can say a font size of 0.8 EM and a color of, let's just do 999 for darkish gray. Let's save this and refresh, and now we get this right here. Cool, so now all of the CSS is done for the actual table. We can move on to, of course, the JavaScript. Okay, so let's go back inside the index.html. So just to reiterate, all of this stuff right here inside the actual container is going to be generated using JavaScript. So basically, when the page first loads up, we are going to select every single element with the class of table refresh. Then we are going to build the HTML for the table and of course the div right here. Included in that is going to be adding the event listeners and a few other things to of course make it all work. So with that being said, let's just comment out the bottom bit. You know what, let's comment out the whole thing. Let's comment this out, and just down here now, like that. Okay, cool. So now let's head inside the app.js. Okay, and the very first thing to do for the JavaScript is going to be creating a new block. And this right here is just so we don't pollute the global namespace or just the global object with random variables and things like that. So let's just go inside here now, and we're going to be defining a function called update table. So I can say function update table, and we're going to leave this blank for now. Okay, but basically it is going to do the job of actually updating the table when we actually press the refresh button. Okay, let's move on, come back to this later on, but let's move on to actually targeting each one of our tables right here and making them work. So basically we're going to be initializing our mini component. Okay, let's go back inside here. We're going to be saying for const root of document.querySelectorAll. We're going to be selecting elements with the class of table refresh and also a valid data URL. So we can say right here dot table dash refresh. Then we can say using square brackets data dash data URL. So here we're using a data attribute. The actual attribute name is called just simply data URL. Maybe this wasn't the best naming convention. In fact, you know what? I might just name this data URL to keep it a bit simpler. Okay, let's go back inside here and make this data URL. Okay, cool. So we have our URL data attribute, and we're selecting every element that meets this criteria. So if I was to say console.log root, let's save this and then refresh, and we should get in the console here our table, which we do, or sorry, our div, which we do right here. Cool. So now let's build the HTML for the table. Let's go inside here, and we're going to firstly just say const table equal to document.createElement. We can create a new table element. Okay. We can also make one for the actual options container. So I can say const options equal to a new div right here. We can then just add the actual class for both these elements. So I can say table.classList.add. We can add the class of table refresh underscore underscore table, and do the exact same thing for the options just down here. So now we have obviously created both the table and of course the options right here. So we can move on to actually including essentially just the HTML inside the table and of course the actual options. So it's going to be very easy. let's just use the inner HTML property. So we're going to be saying table.innerHTML is equal to a new template string, and essentially we're going to be pasting in here a t-head, so an empty t-head, a single table row, okay, also a t-body, and also a tr, and this tr is just going to contain some text to say loading. So we can say td, then we can say loading inside here as the default for the actual text. When this first loads up, just down here, we're going to be running the update table method or the function up here. So don't worry if you just see loading when you first create this. So now we can just say root.append, okay, and append here both the table and the options. So now we're going to have both the table and the options appended to the actual root element, of course, this one right here. So now let's save this and then refresh the page, and now we can see we get loading right there. If I was to inspect this, we can see we have of course the t head with the single tr and of course the loading text, and we've also got the actual table refresh options, which are yet to include the actual options. So let's include that right now. Let's go back inside here, and we are going to be saying options.innerHTML equal to a new template string. Inside here we can include the span with a class of table refresh __ label. Then we can say inside the default text we can just say last update and make this never, okay, and for the button type button class of table refresh __ button. Okay, cool. And of course including here the span, the I with a class of material icons. Okay, and of course inside here the refresh icon. So now saving this and refreshing, we get something like this. So now essentially we are ready to do the fetch call to of course retrieve the data. But first, one more thing to do inside, or two more things to do inside the actual for loop here. One of them is to add an event listener for when you actually click on the button. So let's go inside here. I might just firstly go up inside the update table, and we can just say console.log hi, something like that, okay? So let's go down here, and now we're going to say essentially just update table and pass through here the root element. Okay, so basically we're going to be updating the contents for this element right here, which we are currently looping through. I forgot to mention earlier, if you have multiple tables which you want this functionality to, be included for, then of course just include multiple of these divs, and it's going to work perfectly fine. Just replace the data URL. So essentially this for loop is meant to handle every single data table you have on your page. So that is why we are taking through the table as a parameter to this function right here. So with that being said, we're passing through the root element, okay? Then we can just say options.query selector. We can select the table refresh button right here, and we can just say when this thing gets clicked on, so add event listener, when it gets clicked on, we are going to simply just update the table and once again pass through root. So now essentially on load, the table is going to be updated, and also when you press on the button, the table is going to be updated. Okay, so with that being said, let's just refresh, and we can see we get high. If I press it again, or if I press refresh, we can see we keep getting high in the console. So it's all working perfectly fine. Let's move on to actually, fetching from the server side. So to do this, let's go back inside here, and we're going to firstly make this function async. So I can say right up here, async function update table. Okay, and then we can pass through the actual, or accept the actual root element, and I may as well just add some JS doc for this. So I can just say here HTML div element for the root, and I can just say description populates a data table with some data. Okay, so quite a poor comment if I'm being honest, but you know what, it does the job. So inside here, the reason why it's being async is because we're going to be taking advantage of async await to, of course, make the fetch calls. Okay, so firstly, when the table is getting updated, we want to update the spinning refresh button. So to do this, we can simply say root.query selector. We're going to be selecting once again the refresh button, and we're going to be saying for this essentially just class list.add. We're going to be adding the class of table refresh button dash refreshing, just like that. So now if I save this, we should see the refresh working. No, it's not. Let's go back inside here and figure out why. It's because I forgot to add a dot for the class name. Let's try it again, refresh, and now we get right here the spinning refresh button, of course, for the refresh. Let's go back inside here, and we are going to be secondly inside here, get a reference to the actual table element itself instead of the root. So I can say const table equal to root.query selector, pass through here table refresh underscore table. So now, of course, this table refers to the table which we created just down here. So now we can actually make the request to, of course, retrieve the JSON. So we can say const response is equal to awaits. We're going to be using the fetch API, so I can say fetch and then pass through here root.dataset.url. So of course, by saying dataset URL, I'm grabbing the data.url property, which will of course give us the actual /data, which I provided right here. So basically, /data is equal to this right here. Okay, cool. So that is now done. So of course, we are fetching the actual response, and then we can say const, let's just do const data equal to, then we can say await response.json, just like that. So of course now we are going to take the response from the server side and parse it as being JSON. So now if I console.log, we should see, if I console.log the data, we should see our random generated data, which we did earlier. Let's go inside the browser, refresh, and we get right here, of course, the data presented nicely to us. So now it's going to be as easy as simply just clearing the table and inserting that data. So let's go back inside here, and we are going to be firstly, like I said, clearing the data. So we can say clear table. And for the clear table, we are going to be saying table.query selector. We're going to be targeting the t-head tr, so basically just a single table header row. We're going to be saying inner HTML equal to an empty string, just to clear up the actual elements inside there already. Let's do the exact same thing for the t body. So basically, we don't want to, we actually want to remove the default tr right here. So of course, by running this right here, we are removing this to essentially make it look like this. Okay, cool. Let's go back up here, and now we can simply just have two blocks of code. We can say populate headers. So for the headers, we can simply just say for const row, you know what, my mistake, for const header of response body dot headers. Okay, so let's go back inside here real quick. We can see I've got the headers array. So basically, we're going to be looping through this headers array. You know what? This needs to be data. My mistake. So for const header of data, for const header of data.headers, we're going to say table.query selector tr. So the exact same thing right there, and we can say insert adjacent HTML. Okay, then we can say after begin, then we can simply just say here th, then pass through the header, just like that, right? So basically using ES6 template strings, we're able to pass through the actual header, which of course is a string here, into the th. And of course, insert adjacent HTML is simply just inserting this HTML right after the beginning of the actual table head. So let's save this and then refresh, and now we get something like this. And you know what? I actually realized just then, in my previous example, country's right here. So let's fix that. My mistake. Let's go inside here and let's make this, what is it? Before end. So now with before end, it just means that this HTML is going to be inserted at the end of the element. So basically, it's going to be inserting it first being the name, then the country, whatever it was. It's going to be inserting name, age, profession, country in order, if that makes sense. So before end just means before the end of the root element. Let's go inside here and refresh, and now we get the headers in the right order. Cool, so it's all working perfectly fine. We can see it being populated right there. Okay, cool. So let's move on to the actual data itself. So let's go back inside here, and we can say populate rows for const row of data.rows. Okay, so for each row, we can just say table.querySelector, pass through here tbody. Then we can say insert adjacent HTML, once again using before end. Okay, and we can say here once again using ES6 template strings with the backtick. We can just make a new tr for each one of our rows. Of course, this time rows, data.rows refers to our rows right here, which I showed earlier. Basically I'll just demonstrate, why not? Maybe not. Let's go back and try again. So our data right here, of course, our rows. So for each row, let's make a new tr. Okay, and we're going to say essentially inside here row.map, because of course our row is actually an array itself. So we have a 2D array here. So basically row.map is going to loop through each one of our individual data columns. So row.map, then we can say col. So col, then we can just say return here. Once again using a nested template string, we can say td. Inside here, pass through a col. Just like that. And then lastly, we can just join this result with an empty string. Is that correct? Maybe not. Let's figure out why. So row.map, okay, that's probably why. There we go. So now we have created essentially just using this, we are converting each data column string into a TD with the data inside of it, and then with that array, we are simply then just joining it up to make it a nice string of HTML. Okay, so now let's save this and then refresh, and we can see now we get the data populated right there, of course, in the correct order in the headers as opposed to my example right here. So that's kind of a big mistake by me, but doesn't matter too much. So let's move on and do the last two things of this video, and that is going to be removing this this refresh rotation, and of course updating this message down here. So let's go back inside, and we're going to be just say here, we can just say update last updated text, and this one is going to be really easy. It's going to be just root.querySelector, then table refresh __ label, then .text content is equal to, let's do last update. Then we can just say inside here new dates, pass through the data.last updated. Then we can just say to local string. So right here, you know, you probably could just use something like moment.js to make the formatting a lot nicer, but let's keep it simple and use the built-in JavaScript formatting. So toLocaleString is going to format the date for the locale which the user is running in. Let's save this and refresh, and we can see right here nothing happened. Let's figure out why once again. So query selector, what's going on here? What have I done? So cannot set property text content of null. Okay, this is probably not right. So label, okay, table fresh, not good. Table refresh. Let's try again, and now we get the date printed right there. So it says here, June 29 at 8:38. Okay, that of course is in my own time zone. It's basically just taken the actual UTC from earlier, so of course 10:34 AM, and converted it into, of course, my time zone, but also it's formatted it to Australian format with the date first, then month, then year. So like I said, you can probably use Moment.js to make this a lot nicer, but for simplicity, let's keep it like that. Okay, so the last thing for today's video is going to be stopping this button from rotating. So very easy. Let's go back inside here, and I can just say copy this this class list right here, and I can paste it down here, and I can just say stop rotating. Inside here, let's say class list.remove and pass through the exact same class of -- refreshing. Let's save this and refresh, and now we get right here the finished product. If I was to refresh, we can see it refreshes perfectly fine. And of course, if I was to go inside here, make this fast 3G, and then try again, we get the slower refresh time. So that right there is creating a data table with refresh capability using HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and of course Express.js. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you later.